Hi, it's so good to be with you today. My name is Kate. I'm a psychologist and church leader, and you might have come across me online or on social media with Headstrong, which is a project for young people all about how to do real life and real faith in the real world. And I want to talk to you today a little bit about that real world thing, and three things in particular about the way that the real world has been in this last year or so. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but life has gone a little bit crazy. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is pressure. They all start with P, by the way, which is kind of tidy. Because, yeah, it's also about pandemic. Because there's this little thing that has been going on in the last year. Way back in March 2020, in a moment, everybody's life changed completely. And what that's meant, let's call it, is that life has been tough, a little bit rubbish. Sometimes that might be what you might call obvious tough, like bereavement or illness or family splitting up and stuff. But there's also a lot that's been tough for less obvious reasons, but has still been really hard for everyone. I mean, there has been so much change. And stress is anything that creates demand on your mind, that asks you to adapt or react. The most challenging bits of pandemic life have been the moments that have been the most unpredictable, when you just don't know what's going to happen next. And your mind isn't designed to manage for so long on such a high alert, and it's taken a toll. Many people are just exhausted right now, and they're utterly fed up of it all. And pandemic isn't just about in the moment challenge, it's really shaken up things that we usually assume or rely on, like the basics of how you believe the world works, the foundations you usually build your life on. I mean, who would have thought ever that you wouldn't be able to go to school or sit exams or leave your house for long periods of time? And it's also bigger stuff. It's stuff that we believe as people about our security, our safety, our freedom. Things like who we can trust and turn to in tough times. In this season where we've been separated from people for so long. So much of pandemic has raised big questions, and our minds need to figure out some of the answers. I mean, literally, what does this mean now as we look forward to a post-pandemic future? Are there things we're going to need to change and carry with us? Has the world changed? Do we need to reassess some of these things that we always assumed would be there? Psychologically speaking, what all of this means is we've all been through a kind of collective trauma, because this has affected us so much. It may be more obviously traumatic and upsetting for some people because of what they've had to deal with, but all of our worlds have been shaken. And when crisis hits you like that, at first you kind of suppress your emotions and get on with it, like head down, and your mind tries not to ask the big questions. But at some point, as part of getting through and getting past what has happened, you need to pause and get your head around some of that stuff. So the next P I want to talk about is process. I mean, not just how do we process what has happened, but what even is the process? How do you come out of pandemic? How is this going to work? Because usually in life we use stories to help us make sense of things that we're experiencing. Stories from the past, stories from other people's lives, stories people tell that kind of lead us in what to expect and how to handle things well. But this is kind of a new story. We've not done this before. And the other problem with stories is that human minds are obsessed with drama. People tend to read and remember and retell stories that are negative much more than ones that are positive. It's easier to focus on stories that end badly than things that end well, the things that we want to avoid instead of the things that tell us how to get where we want to be. So how do we come out of pandemic well, as individuals, as people doing this together? What does that look like? And for you guys in particular, as young people growing up in pandemic times, right now, if you read the media, you're likely to see a bunch of stories about your generation that say some pretty depressing stuff about how pandemic has hit you and what your future might look like. But is that the whole story? You see, the third P I want to talk to you about is something unexpected that can be found in the middle of pandemic pressure and even in the post-pandemic world. And it's this: potential. Let me tell you something that a guy called Paul wrote way back, like centuries ago. He was one of the earliest followers of Jesus, and he travelled around telling people about God. And as he did that, he hit tough times because not everybody liked what he had to say. So he didn't hit global pandemic, I admit it, but he did hit isolation and persecution, and he had to overcome a lot. And this is something he told some of his friends he had learned. It's from Romans 5, it's verses 3 to 5, and this is the Passion translation of the original Greek that he wrote in. And he says this: even in times of trouble, we have a joyful confidence, knowing that our pressures will develop in us patient endurance. And patient endurance will refine our character. And proven character leads us back to hope. And this hope is not a disappointing fantasy because we can experience the endless love of God. Now look, what Paul is talking about there is about times when we are facing stuff we cannot solve. You know, it doesn't matter how clever you are, you could not solve global pandemic. What you had to do was find a way through. That's what Paul calls enduring. I don't know about patiently enduring. Patience isn't really my strongest virtue, but basically it's about times when you have to get on with it because you don't have any other choice. That's what we've had to do in this last year plus. And what he's saying is that when you hit stuff like that, it's a bit rubbish, but there's an unexpected outcome. It can actually refine us, shape us, grow something in us that's really good. Good for now, but also good for the future. And that's really interesting. Because you know what? Modern psychology tells us Paul totally nails this. It's true, and it's especially true for young people. Basically, right now, your brain is figuring out a whole bunch of stuff about how yourself and the world and how those things work together. And as you encounter challenges and problems and hopefully manage to solve them and find ways through, you learn stuff. You learn stuff about yourself. You learn you are capable. You can influence the world around you. You can change things. You can solve things. You can make a difference for yourself when you need to improve things or lift your mood or make stuff better, but also for other people who might need some help. Pressure releases our potential, particularly when it's the type of pressure we can't escape, because it forces us to dig deep and find out how much we can do. And that's really important because even the best things in life involve pressure. In fact, especially the best things. Think about the things that matter to you most, the things that are most important to you, whether that's doing exams, starting uni, new jobs, making new friends, even fun stuff like going on a first date. All of those things are bound to make you a bit anxious because they matter. So the more you have learned about your capability, the more you can push those things more, the more you feel you can give things a go because your confidence grows. The more when you hit stuff that's difficult, you can feel hopeful, not hopeless. You can carry hope. Listen, this is not about becoming some kind of super person who gets everything right and never needs help from anyone. Pandemic has pushed us all to moments where we felt like, I can't do this anymore. Sometimes the most important part of our story is the time when we hit stuff we don't know how to handle, or when we realise we have messed things up, we can't solve this on our own, and we have to learn how to reach out and ask for help. You were never meant to do this on your own. But what's interesting is the story. When tough times hit, are we stuck forever in the role of the victim, or can we find the way to play the lead in a story that's about victory? Can we figure out how to defiantly hold hope and find a way through? You know, tough stuff stories don't have to end in that chapter. Where we do have stories of previous generations of young people like you who've grown up in crazy and disrupted times, mostly coming from the last World War, they don't actually tell of a generation destroyed and damaged forever by what they experienced. They tell of people who, had to find a way through some tough stuff, but who emerged unusually strong and resourceful, who had learned what really mattered, and in fact then drove some significant change, pushed their world to rethink some big stuff. I don't think your generation is lost. I think your generation could change the world. You know, at Headstrong, we love to tell stories, real life stories from real people about how they got through stuff that life threw at them. Stories that help us figure out how we get through ourselves when we hit something we didn't expect. Check it out at beheadstrong.uk or look on your social media channels for Be Headstrong. But for now, let me just take a moment to pray. Because you know what, sometimes to release your full potential, you have to process some pressure. And that's a challenge of this moment. And I want to say in particular to those of you who are caught up in some painful stuff, don't despair. God can make things that even feel impossible possible. That's what Paul means when he talks about hope that isn't a disappointing fantasy. If pandemic has taught us anything, it's that sometimes we need to reach out to something beyond human cleverness, beyond our own wisdom or that of people around us, to find something bigger, something better. You know what? No matter what this last year has brought, God created you. He made you and he loves you and he's going to see you through. So if you're struggling to find hope right now, let's just pray. And I pray that you would see brighter moments in the coming days and weeks, that God would show you how much he loves you. I pray for little things that make you laugh, things that make you dream again, things that remind you of good stuff. Like when the sun comes out for a moment on a grey day, but like inside, in your head. I pray for good friendships. I pray for you to learn more about the amazing person that you are. And I pray that over all of us. God, help us to see the story you are speaking over us, not the story our media speaks or our fears speak. Help us to know that pandemic and all the stuff it has caused is not the end of our story. Help us to look forwards and to write brighter chapters ahead. In the name of Jesus, Amen.